Hey, what's up, everybody? This is Mike Barry from Cinesamples. Well, tonight I'm going to go over my template, which I run Logic, which is different from Mike. And a lot of people have been asking how we do our templates, and wow, it's not an easy thing to get to the place where you're happy with your template, and you're happy with your gear, and you're happy with your sample libraries. It takes a lot of effort and a lot of time figuring out how your workflow is best supported by your gear. So, I know Logic. I've bought and flirted with DP at one time and Cubase at another time. I used to use DP actually before I used Logic. But I know Logic. I know it very well, or at least the things that I need to know. So, why learn another program? They're all not that different. There's one or two things you might favor in other programs. But in general, know what you know and go with it. So here I am in Logic. I'll give you guys a little information about what kind of gear I'm running here. This is the way my studio looks right now. This is my keyboard. It's the Akai MPK88. I hardly use any of it. I use here, the mod wheel and the pitch thing. I use these 4 faders. And I don't use any of this stuff over here. And I use the keys, of course. I just added myself a PreSonus fader port. You could easily do without this, but I thought it'd be nice. I'll explain more later. Here's an iPad. I don't use it for anything to do with composing. It's simply there to keep me company and play some old movies most of the time, not at my speakers. Keyboard. That's really all you need. Now, for me personally, what's a big deal is I like to have a lot of real estate monitors. So I have upgraded my Mac Pro that I'm recording on. This is a 2009 Mac Pro, 2.293 quad-core, 16 gigabyte. This is what I'm using to host Logic right now. So I'm going to go back to this picture. I had to upgrade the video card so I could have the 3 monitors. For me, that's a big deal. It might not be for you, but for me, having all this extra space really helps my workflow for some reason. I don't know why. It just does. So that's my server, that's my hosting computer running Logic. That's all it's running right now. I'm using 32-bit mode. I think the latest version, which I don't want to do about Logic Pro because it shows my serial number. But I'm using that, and I'm also switching to 64-bit if I'm using something heavy, mostly with Omnisphere. So if I'm using no Omnisphere, which is a lot of the orchestra writing I do, I don't use that. So I'm in 32-bit mode. It's solid as rock. Here's some of my outboard gear. Well, this is all my outboard gear, actually. I got 2 power conditioners. Nothing's fancy here. I have 2 Mac Pros now. These 2 are running my my Logic computer. These 2 on the bottom, these Motu 2408s, are running my server. So these are hooked up to my new Mac Pro, which is a 2011 Mac Pro, the 16 core with 32 gigs of RAM. Let me pull up the system specs in a minute. I have 3 pieces of outboard gear that I use. One I use the most, which is the Bricasti M7, which is probably the best reverb you can get right now, I think. Boston Hall A is a preset I really like. But you know what? There's so many good presets. Don't let anybody tell you there's one that wins over all of them. Here's my Lexicon reverb that I've had since like 2002. I use this to get that huge reverb tail. So I'll dial something up big, with like a 5 or 6 second tail, and I'll drop some low pizzicato or timpani, and I'll have it go boom and ring out. This is a powerful piece of gear, the DBX 120. I think this is the 120A, which is just a later version, I think. It gives your bass some kick, and I scarcely don't use it anymore. So here's my Mac Pro, my second Mac Pro. Here's the one I'm using as a server, and here's the one I'm using as a sample host, as a host for Logic, that is. Speakers-wise, this is something you really want to spend some time and energy researching. I have the Atom A7s. I have 2 of them. They sit fairly close to my ears, I don't have the greatest room, I don't have a horrible room, but when they're so close to your face, you can hear what's going on. So I've got a pair of Atom A7s. I'm really happy with them. I see lots of guys out here using them, using versions of the Atoms at least. Maybe some people use the bigger one. And it's hard to see, but I can actually hear directly through. The iPad is not blocking, which is important. I have them raised to my ear level. You can see a little stand here we made to raise the tweeter to my ear level. I like to kind of sit low when I'm composing. Okay, so here's a big thing for me. This is via screen share. I don't have my server Mac Pro hooked up to anything except screen share. I don't use it that much. Even though it's the most expensive piece of gear I own, I'm still a strong supporter of put your best computer on sample hosting detail. Put your second best computer, if you're using a two-computer setup, on hosting your sequencer. And let's face it, the less you have in your sequencer, usually the better it does. So don't get freaked out by this. This is Bidule. This is the latest version of Bidule. And I'm having a little bit of issues. For example, the 15.09 gigabytes is not accurate. It's actually at 22. And if I check my iStat menus, it's at 24. So I have 24 gigs loaded on this machine. Let me pull up the specs on this machine. It's a 32 gigabyte Mac Pro 10.66. This is the 6 core, so I guess it's a 12 core. It's a good machine. I bought it at the end of the last year. It's, I'm really happy with this two-computer setup. I'm actually running Bidule to host the samples, which means I'm not using VE Pro. VE Pro just doesn't work as well as Bidule for me. For some reason, I know it works for a lot of guys. I'm not saying it's bad. For me, Bidule works better. I just leave Bidule loaded all day, all night, and I know where it is. It never crashes. Having one computer, having one file that I'm working with at all times is very important for me. I just like to have this one thing, and I save it, and that's it. I don't like to have to save it 3 or 4 times in different places and then load it in different places. So let's head back to the Bidule here. I know there's a lot of stuff that's probably confusing here, but all that's going on is I have MIDI coming in to contacts. I have contacts going to mixers. Here's a mixer. Here's contact. Here's MIDI in. And then from the mixer, I have it going to the output. That's it. I'm not using anything fancy. The only thing that I'm using is this, where is it? This thing, the MIDI clock to sync, which gives Bidule temporal awareness, which is handy for things like Hollywood Winds on the runs, and the OSR library too. So my MIDI is going out from Logic via external MIDI instruments. You can see there's a whole bunch of them right here. I'll just select one. Here's a Symphobia patch. And I use 2 things to get the MIDI across to the other Mac Pro via the internet, Ethernet actually. So I have MIDI over LAN, which I've had for quite a long time. Here it is, MIDI over LAN. Great program, steady as a rock once you get it set up. And then there's a new solution, IP MIDI, which is free. So I have a whole bunch. So I have 16 times 12 times whatever, how many there are. I think there's 16 in a MIDI core. So I have 16 times 16 plus 16 times 16. So I have a whole bunch of channels coming in MIDI. Now, on my 2408s, I have everything running ADAT. I have an external clock, which I find works really well. It's from Black Lion Audio, and I also upgraded. Let me pull my. Oops, I lost it. Let me pull my my picture of my gear rack again. All right, that's not it. That's not it. Here it is. So this 2408, I sent away to Black Lion Audio, which is a great website. You should check it out. And they replace everything analog in this machine, the 2408 Mark III. It really makes a huge difference, especially in bass drum stuff like orchestral drums. They don't crack when you're listening to them. There's more room. It's really a huge improvement. So I have the 2408 modded from Black Lion Audio. I also have behind, you can't see here, I have Black Lion Audio's clock hardwired to this 2408 and this 2408, one for each computer. So in my PCI MIDI settings, I'm going to open that up here, you can see I have the 2408 Mark III word clock in. And that thing works like a rock. It's a really a good thing to have. I highly recommend it. So here I am back in my template. And this is kind of where the fun begins. For me, the way I like to work is I like to have most of these things loaded. The stuff I use all the time. And then I like to be able to add things that I use less often. Like if I'm using Omnisphere, I'm going to click this H and a whole bunch of new stuff opens up. So these are my inputs coming in from the Server Mac Pro, and this is the most important thing I think on the template. This is what it's all about, guys. It's all about gain management. When you're monitoring, crank that thing way up. You want to be hitting with here's my master add, I'm going to turn off everything. You want to be hitting around 2/3. That's a good thing when you're recording somebody. When you're recording a vocalist, you want to hit around 2/3 as your highest thing. That gives you some headroom to add, which is not a problem these days. There's lots of good plugins that add headroom. So you want to be hitting around 2/3 when you're composing. Now the way I do that is I like to keep all my tracks. I'm going to go to my mixer window. I only use 3 screen sets. I use the piano roll to edit MIDI with the hyperwriter down here, and then I use this is my master range, and then I use environment window over here, and I use my favorite new plugins, the UAD stuff, UAD 2 cards. I have a Duo UAD right now. I just ordered a quad, so I'm going to have 6 cores. They'll be arriving tomorrow. And why do I like these? For 2 reasons. One, they run on their own processing power, which is huge for Logic people. Logic has the deadly 1-core curse. If you're using things, it tends to run on 1 core, and you get a 1-core spike for anything coming in live. That means if I had a bunch of altoverbs or whatever on these things, or EQs, they're all running off 1 core, and I hate that. It really slows down your workflow. So I bypass that by using the UAD cards. So I have, these are all my inputs coming in. You can see I've got LA scoring strings, which is my main scoring string library. I have the long and short separated. I have ensemble stuff like Symphobia shorts and custom shorts. I have brass other, which is kind of just every brass library that's not Cinebrass. I have Hollywood Winds, good to be on its own bus. VSL Woodwinds. Until somebody makes something better with full legato, these are still in play, even though they're kind of old. And even though if somebody upgrades this, I'm still going to use the flute from VSL Woodwinds. That thing's awesome. So I just upgraded to Spitfire Perk. I'm still kind of learning it. Before that, I was using Project Sam stuff. Timpani, I have the Spitfire and the East-West loaded. I have 2 or 3 tone hammer big things, like the Epic Doll, and I can't remember what are the Epic Tom Low. Most of my Symphobia stuff I like to keep on 1 bus because it all sounds the same, and if I apply EQ, it all comes through. So ensembles, this is stuff like Cineorc and other ensembles that I have that aren't Symphobia, and Voxos for the choir, and then I have harps and celeste coming over here. They're good to control because sometimes the harps and celeste can get really out of hand and they need to be compressed. So they're good to have their own bus. I have the Tone Hammer Emotional Piano over here. I have the Tone Hammer Small Perks over here. Here's the Cinebrass horns and the Cinebass trumpets and all the bones. I use, as of now, our bones aren't finished, so I have everything, all the other bones loaded using the East-West. Drums of War 1 on its own thing. I also run the Cinetoms and Cinesnares, and those are my first choice for the things we made. So Cinesnares, Cinecrash. I honestly think those are the best right now. They're very strong. The Cinesnares, the military plus piccolo doubling is like total magic. You guys want to check that out. Don't quantize it. Let them flam against each other. And Drums of War 2 is something I'm kind of really getting into right now. keeping the drums in the front of the mix rather than in the back. It really helps to drive your track. It really works well with electronic stuff, and with guitars and with grooves. You know, Drums of War 1 plus like the Epic Doll from Toneheimer is a pretty massive sound. You know, you've probably heard that in a lot of movies. But Drums of War 2, I'm really digging the close stuff. That's just kind of the way I'm going right now. So I've got everything coming in here. This is ADAT in. And for every channel, I've got a high-pass filter coming in. Reason being, low frequencies tend to build up in all music, especially in sample writing. Because if you're playing a chord, if you're playing a 3-note chord, that's 3 times that it was recorded. That's 3 times the bass. That's 3 times the treble. So you have to really be careful about what you're bringing into the system here. So I've got this is like the free one that comes with Apple. I don't know if DP people have this or Cubase people, but I set it at 77 hertz and I just write it down over 2 octaves. That's copied on everything because bass management is really important. I have everything coming in with a UAD precision bus compressor, which is freaking amazing. This is about the best bus compressor you can get. Mostly because it's got this mix wet and dry knob, and like this knob right here is very important too, the output level. Say you have a library that's kind of a quiet library. I think like some of the Spitfire stuff is a little bit quiet for my taste. The way I like to control that is adding gain right here. So I just added 6 decibels gain to that without having to move my fader down here. So 0, 0, 0. I like to keep these at 0. On my final mixing things, I might go into touch mode and drop it down for a phrase, drop it up for a phrase, and then settle it back to 0. So these aren't moving much. I do most of the level setting up here. Everything's coming into this computer natural at 0. So that's that. I really have been a big fan of this plugin, the Manley Massive Passive. I think this is about the best EQ you can get. Regarding EQ, there's 2 things I really have to say. If you're envision this, when you're recording a sample library, like when we recorded Cinebrass, everything's the full spectrum. When Dennis put the mics up, it was the full sound. Now, if he was mixing that with a full orchestra, he might drop some frequencies out of the low trumpets to make room for something else, to make room for the choir, to make room for the strings. So I think EQing a lot of stuff in general is a good thing. You're going to be dropping a lot of frequencies. Using the Logic thing to drop frequencies is pretty good. I find that most EQs can drop frequencies pretty decently. This is a kind of very plain sound, the Logic one. I don't like to use it right now because I've got these better ones. But if you're going to add frequencies, you really need an EQ with that's good. If you're going to replace frequencies, if you don't like what's going on in the library in the high range and you want to change it, I think you're going to have to research and buy a good plugin for that. The UAD stuff, the Massive Passive is probably the best one I think on the market. The Pultec is good. The Neve is good. You know, these are stuff that's been used in studios for just ever and ever. They're really high quality pieces of gear. And look at this. There's not much to it. This is my Voxos preset. Let me pull up Voxos. This is still kind of a work in progress, but you got a library here. And let me play the same thing and I'll bypass what I have going on here. I'm going to take off the reverb too. It's a subtle difference, but in a mix you can hear it. And these are things, I think once you discover them once, you're good. Once you find a good LA scoring strings, EQ, and signal chain, just keep it. Save it as your next template. Save it as a 1.9.3. That way you start from scratch. I've got everything going to the precocity equally at minus 10 decibels. And here's the precocity output and input. This way I can control the amount of reverb I'm having. At 0, it's kind of washy, so I usually drop it down to -8, -6, depending upon the track, how ambient it is. This is my output to the lexicon, which I have nothing going to that run. That's kind of more of a special effects thing. Both of these are special effects things. So, spend a lot of time here. You want to get a good balance of what's in right now. Like, what's in? Horns are in. French horns, when they're playing their tune, they're going to be louder than the strings. And that's in style right now. If you're doing a tutti with the strings and the violins, you want to drop the violins down and let the horns sing out. Brass, low brass is in. String shorts are in, but you want to have them under control. You don't hear a lot of melody string writing except in kind of animation stuff these days. So you want to make sure your strings aren't too strong, and that's kind of the thing I hear often. You want to kind of go with the flow. Percussion is in, but you want to keep it under control. So you definitely want to be checking out your compression settings for percussion. And these things tend to change, but at least you have a good starting point. So you want to get everything to a nice level that you like. Fool around with the output knobs. Probably -6 to +6 is the range you're going to be in. And that way you can find out, make a good balance for your thing. And then you're pretty much ready to start writing. So this is a lot of work for you to set up. Before you're even choosing patches, there's a lot of things that you want to keep in mind. You can see I have a lot of patches loaded. But it's all about gain. And when I say gain, I don't mean just volume in that one section I was at. I mean gain over here on the master channel. I mean balance when you're having a chord, who you're favoring the chord. If you have a chord and one of the samples you have sounds bad, mask it with a gain from another thing. Drop the gain, pull up the gain from something else. I think that's really what a lot of the writing comes down to. Gain, layering, it's kind of all the same thing. It's a classic technique to mask what you're weak at in the sample library world. So before I go, and the next tutorial, I'll actually write a piece with this template to show you guys what's going on here. But one thing I find that's really important is to go through your libraries and know them. I mean, if you're going to be spending money, I think what you want to spend your most money on is your computer. Monitors is a really good investment for one time. What I feel like is a waste of money is buying all these little gizmos that sit on top of the keyboard for like $1,000 and that have like two motorized faders. They're just eye candy. You can totally survive without that. You don't need much in the way of that. But buying sample libraries, I mean, even though I'm a developer, it's really important because the times have turned, and a lot of the things that are old are pretty old now, mostly because they don't have legato transitions or multiple mics on them. So, when you get a library, go through it, play everything, learn what's the strengths, what's the weaknesses. Like, there's certain things you might like. Like I really like the low shorts in cinematic strings. So sometimes I add those to my LA scoring strings. But I think LA scoring strings sings better, especially in the 0 to like 70 mod wheel range, which is the really strong part of it. And that's another actually thing of gain that we can talk about, is that when you're using instruments, this is probably, now that I'm thinking about it, this is probably like the most important thing entering MIDI data. Using the mod wheel correctly and using CC7 correctly. For example, if I'm going to pull up Cineorg here, I'll just play some low chords. If you're entering data and you're trying to go for a vibe that's like medium piano, you don't want to be having your patches being played at double forte and then taking the volume down. You want to have them being played at the dynamic you want and using CC7 to get it at the volume that you want. That's really important. And you'll find a lot of libraries have sweet spots right in the middle of the mod wheel. When you're recording a library, it has to be able to cover so much stuff these days. that it's not uncommon for the top part of the mod wheel to be, you might not use it for a whole score if it's a quiet score, and the opposite could be true if it's a loud score. So getting to know your libraries is so important, and having good libraries and finding out the best patches for the way you work. I know a lot of people probably like to have the LA scoring strings with all the fancy settings, but I have them DVC'd out. Like, I like to have the auto DVC loaded separately, so they're always auto DVC, and I have the unison patches over here. That's just like the way I like to work. I like to have, I use this patch a lot, the Symphobia strings, sustain. Great patch, and sometimes I like to have 2 or 3 things with that because I like to play that stuff and then double it with LA scoring strings. I'll just do it. Anyway, guys, in the next video, I'll go on to more things regarding your libraries and how to write music with this. But I hope you enjoyed this. Hit me up with any questions. Peace out.